Hey everybody, it's your boy, and today's video is going to be about how Russian and Chinese propaganda take advantage out of your insecurities. We've all seen articles with Chinese children allegedly saying that they want to be astronauts and soldiers when they grow up, and Western kids want to be YouTubers and TikTok creators. And then we've also seen the amazing displays of military might from China and Russia, the beautiful formations, the amazing marches and equipment on display. I mean, we look to ourselves in the West, what do we have to counter that? And lo and behold, we have a military, we have a society that is cooked, it is paused. Our military is more interested in diversity quotas. Most recently, the RAF said they were going to put on hold any white male applicants so they could boost up those minority quotas. And of course, the less said about the American Joint Chiefs of Staff, the better. And if you're a fairly right-wing person who has a love for their country and wants their civilization to thrive and prosper, that doesn't look good, does it? It makes it out that these two countries are amazing and yours is not, because you see your civilization becoming decadent and taken over by leftists. Meanwhile, you see Russia and China not being woke, at least as far as you can see. They're acting exactly how any normal country should act. And how does it make you feel, guys? It makes you feel dejected. It makes you feel demoralised. It makes you wish that you could be on their par, because if a war happens, oh no, heaven forbid a war happens, we will be unprepared. We won't be able to handle it. They will steamroll us because all we have is a bunch of effeminate men who can't fight, and our civilization will be destroyed if World War III does occur. But that's the thing. That propaganda is designed to make you in particular feel that way about your own countries and your own civilization, and to make theirs look better than they actually are, when the truth is actually not as black and white as you guys think it is. All this propaganda, all these videos that you see with the formations of airplanes, the articles about society, it's all fluff pieces, and most of it is bunk. As I've said before in a few videos, and other right-wing commentators who have a bit more sense have said, Russia and China as well, particularly China, are demographic time bombs. In fact, Russia is going through its own population replacement, and it's not even on purpose. And with China, they're going through what Japan has gone through, only worse. Their one-child policy, which is now a two-child policy, has now failed, and it's created a demographic problem where there is now more men than women. And some of these men, quite a large percentage of them, will never be married and have kids in their life, unless the government finds a way to get them wives, but they can't get them from outside the country. These are not countries that demographically and societally are doing particularly well. China is not a place that is safe for the average person necessarily. You may, of course, think about your own big cities and the crime waves that they're currently going through. But look at China, for example. If you guys watch The China Show, Serpents a Day, China Uncensored, anything like that, you will know that China has deep-seated, violent problems in its society. You have people that will go around essentially harassing women and men as well, really, and get into fights. There's a massive epidemic of knife-wielding men going into kindergartens or nurseries and stabbing the kids because they have issues, and that stems from their culture where they put everything into the male kid and they want him to succeed and look after them. But of course, the men who end up committing these crimes fail and lash out because they failed in life, at least in Chinese life anyway. They kill the next generation as revenge. This is a massive issue that, unless you watch these dissident channels, you would never know that that is a problem. And of course, Russia's societal problems are well known. Poverty, alcoholism, drug use. And what about the military? Well, Russia has not exactly done well in Ukraine, has it? It may well beat Ukraine if it manages to get its act together, but it doesn't look like it's been a particularly good fight from them. In fact, it's been downright embarrassing. Just recently in the Black Sea, they've lost a hell of a lot of ships. I think it was about 13 in the most recent engagement, and they've lost an admiral. And their ammunition supplies are getting raided and destroyed by the Ukrainian foot soldiers and drone strikes. And the front line is slowly but surely going back to where it was before the war started. Although again, depending on how well their recent offensives do and their defensive actions, anything could happen. But the front line looks a lot better now for the Ukrainians than it did at the beginning. And as for the Chinese, their army hasn't been tested since they invaded Vietnam in the late 70s. They've never had to go out there and actually fight a real fight. And in the little skirmishes they've had with India, they didn't cover themselves with glory. They got beat up pretty handedly by the Indian soldiers. Their navy is pitiful. It's a brown water navy at best, which means it's not really ocean going. It can project force all around the world. The Royal Navy, considering its current state, can still project force, and we have aircraft carriers, although diesel, that are miles better than anything the Chinese have, where they're still using old Soviet equipment, although their newest ones are of course much better, but they pale in comparison to ours, let alone the Americans. They claim that they can take Taiwan in an instant, just like how they did with Hong Kong. Only every time that they've said that a line has been crossed, so for example, senators visiting Taiwan not long ago, Pelosi visiting Taiwan, other things that have happened over the years, they say that they'll invade, they'll definitely attack Taiwan, but they never do because they know they can't crack it. They won't be able to take it because it's essentially a big fortress in the middle of the sea. If you thought Ukraine was bad, which was entirely on land, how do you think the Chinese are going to fare with an amphibious assault? The Germans couldn't even invade England during World War II. How do you think the Chinese are going to do it? So in the end, the Chinese just threw a load of missiles into the sea and killed a load of fish. This is the military that I'm meant to be afraid of. And let's not forget that this military also is not as well trained as ours. Say what you want about the cultural Marxist policies that have seeped into our military, it's not affecting the training as far as I'm aware just yet. We're still producing highly trained troops. The Russian army is based largely on conscripts, and the Chinese, their training is pitiful, as seen with the many videos of people failing to throw grenades properly. But why do people still fall for this? Well, it's mainly ignorance and envy. They are so black-pilled by what is going on around them. They're so insular in many ways. They don't really look at politics from outside their own countries, or they're least outside their own continent, like I've been trying to do recently, which gives you a bigger perspective and allows you to see things from a different angle, so they can only see the negativity here and the positives in another place, because when everything is so bad where you are, anything else looks better in comparison. But of course, if you've ever left a job that's pretty bad and think this new one that you've got is going to be great and it turns out to be worse, yeah, the grass is always greener on the other side, as we know. So yes, it's a combination of those factors, but also it's the fact that these countries are also supporting the cultural enemies. These are the ones that have been pumping money into these cultural Marxist groups for decades. It was the Russians initially with the Soviet Union that drove a lot of these people into positions of influence with their funding and with their training. We only have to look at second wave feminism, we only have to look at the universities and the Long March. That was helped primarily by Soviet money. And then later on, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the money stopped, China took over and continue to do so, because bear in mind, a lot of these people will say that, oh, well, it's not in their countries. Yes, they export it to us. So these countries are not based. They are trying to weaken you on purpose, and you can't seem to see it, even though it's right there in your face. Even though these people are all allied together in many ways, you will always see the SJW support China. Why do you think tankies support China? Because they're funded by them. And now with Russia, now that they've recovered somewhat and can actually start flexing their financial muscles, Dugin has been out there going from the left and the right, trying to fund all these crazy fringe groups and trying to subvert them for his own Eurasian goals, which kind of, sort of, but don't really go hand in hand with Putin's as well. And Putin has his own thing. He is, of course, a former KGB agent after all. He knows a little thing about subversion and things like that. But when you start to look at it, it makes sense. Why do you think China has the Confucius Institute in practically every university? Why do you think a lot of their moguls are going out there buying property and building flats and buildings and God knows what else all over the West, not just the world? Why do you think Russian oligarchs, at least up until recently, were moving to London, New York, wherever? Why do you think all this was happening? Influence, subversion. Now, it's not election fraud or anything like that. I think they would love to be able to do that, but I think they don't want to do that anyway because it's a bit too out there in the open, and honestly, they don't need to do any of that. But if they can influence the mainstream through soft power and also the fringe, well, they don't need to influence election because essentially through their influence, we will influence ourselves. It's weird, but that's how it works. But people like George Galloway and the numerous shills that always go on about how great China is on YouTube, like Ramesses II, well, where do they come from? They come from all those decades of funding and influence and subversion. Why do you think Jeremy Corbyn not long ago was accused of being a Russian spy, or at least an asset, by this Czech guy? Because that's what they were doing at the time, and it's very possible that he was, considering who he loves in the world. He loves Iran. He's against the Ukraine war, regardless of your opinions on that on my channel. He is pro-Russia in this engagement. He pretends to be a pacifist, but he very much isn't. If Corbyn had become Prime Minister, Britain would become a stooge of Duganism and China within a matter of months. You're lucky that Keir Starmer is not like that. You're lucky that the Tories are not like that. And by and large, the British, and we're very lucky that the British establishment don't swing that way. All of this is designed to weaken us. It's designed to weaken our culture and our values and our political systems. The end goal for America is civil war. They're trying to stoke up resentment and hatred and divisions in that country, and they're trying to do it in my country too, because they know that if America is like that, it will cross over into my country and then eventually other Anglophone countries, and by extension Europe, which is why France is going through a massive purge of SJWs at the moment from both the left and the right, because it's not French. And they know a weakened West is good for them because they themselves are not actually that strong. Both countries are paper tigers, especially China, whose economy is hanging by a thread, and Russia will eventually start to feel the strain of these sanctions because, let's be honest, their GDP is equivalent to Italy. It's terrible. They're a poor country, really, let's be honest. If we are weak culturally, if we are weak militarily, at least in our minds, not materially, they will find it much easier to expand and grow and to project their own influence and power. That's how China really can become the world superpower. They won't, because they've messed it up for themselves, and Russia will never ever have that chance again. That's how they've been playing the game. They can't do it via conquest, but they can do it via subversion, and it was working up until their own policies bit them in the arse. And because most people in our sphere of the internet can't see that, it's working. But thankfully, we have them shooting themselves in the foot that will save us. So anyway, that's how their propaganda influences you. And when you realise it's much bigger than your little corner of the internet, it's way bigger than your town, your country, you will realise quite quickly that, oh yeah, actually, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And then you can start seeing things with more perspective. And I actually think it's less blackpilling in that regard, because you realise you're not alone. But anyway, until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.